Hello, everyone. I'm joined by Madeleine Black. Madeleine is a psychotherapist. She's the author of the book Unbroken and an international speaker. Madeleine, thank you very much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Madeleine, I spoke to you over 2 months ago. I spoke to you in August, and a lot has happened ever since. Iranian women have had their own Me Too movement. Thousands of them actually resorted to Twitter and other social media apps to actually talk about their sexual harassment stories. And I don't know how that happened, but it was absolutely magnificent, given that they don't really have any laws protecting them. So one man was arrested and he actually confessed to rape. And he said that he was sadistic and he had issues and everything like that. But unfortunately, then it was quiet because none of the officials really looked into the case of women seriously. And so I thought I'll get back to you so that you can actually pump up some courage again and maybe have another serious Me Too movement in Iran. For those who didn't manage to watch the last interview, can you kindly tell us a little about yourself and about your journey?
Sure. So I always say that I feel like I'm an accidental speaker. You're never really intended to speak, but I shared my own story of sexual violence. I was gang raped when I was just 13 years old by two men, and I shared it about 6 years ago, and the doors just really opened. You know, I was invited to speak and share my story on newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, and I realized that my voice is now my power. My voice is my strength, that courage is contagious. You know, it was somebody else speaking out that helped me to find my voice, and I've realized that I can help other people to find their voice, because when we are silent, it really harms us and it really protects the perpetrators. So it was my shame that really kept me quiet. And it's a shame that keeps most men and women quiet as well, because as you know, by society, even worse in other countries, we're not supported to speak out about these things. So I am passionate about speaking out to help end the shame, the stigma, and the silence surrounding sexual violence, but also to help other people find their courage and their voice too, so that they can live their best life.
Well, Madeleine, I think a lot of maybe the viewers don't know what really happened to you. And I know that you went through a horrific ordeal. You were only 13 years old. Can you give us a little bit of the story of what happened to
Sure.
you?
So I did, I guess, what most teenage girls did. One night I lied about where I was staying. My friend's mum was away and we both had the use of her empty flat, and we decided to buy some alcohol. I had never ever drunk before, so really unsurprisingly I got drunk very quickly. We had drunk it in secret in a cafe in North London where I lived at the time, and two of the young men took us back to her mum's empty flat. And it became really clear very quickly, you know, they weren't there to let me sleep off the alcohol or take me out of the clothes I'd been sick in. Very quickly I became aware that they were there to rape me, both of them, which lasted about 4 or 5 hours, which had a huge impact on my life. And in fact, it was only when I was writing my book that I realized I had been raped 3 more times, because I didn't really understand about consent. You know, one of the many side effects for me was I became very promiscuous, and I just put these other occasions down to bad sex, you know, really just a bad night. But when I was writing my book, I realized that I had said no and they had said yes, and just carried on anyway. So before the age of 18, I had been raped by 5 separate men.
And Madeleine, this is the thing that one thing that I wanted to ask you is, you were very young, you were only 13. And, you know, I was in the UK at that age, and I know how it is, the environment and everything. You're so carefree. And I don't know if that was true about you, but being at such a young age and not having the tools to cope with such a trauma, what was your reaction? What did you do?
Yeah, well, I really shut down. You know, one of the very last things they said to me was that if I spoke about it, they would kill me, and they threatened me with a knife, and I had been stabbed by this knife already, and I believed them. So I really didn't speak for about 3 years. I developed an eating disorder. I became depressed. I was suicidal. I had a suicide attempt. I then spent about 2 or 3 months in a children's psychiatric ward because I had an eating disorder as well. And I used drugs, alcohol, anything, you know, to numb out, just forget and kind of push it far, far away from my mind as much as I possibly could. So they were very, very dark days.
And would you have flashbacks of that moment of what happened to you? Would
Not,
it reoccur, or
yeah,
would you just try to, you know, push it away and not think about it and just pretend that you're okay, or believe that you're okay?
yeah, in those moments, in those first few years, the mind is an amazing tool. You know, it really shuts and took away all memories from me completely. And I just felt very awful. I just felt very dark and hated myself, was disgusted with myself. I felt contaminated and worthless, didn't understand the point of being alive. But at the time, I couldn't grab hold of the memories. They were so distant, you know, I couldn't make sense of what had happened. So I just pushed it further and further away from my consciousness. And the flashbacks would take quite a few years for them to come. But when they came big time.
And Madeleine, you're a psychotherapist, so you deal with a lot of people who have mental illnesses and disorders.
Yeah.
And so I want to know that, is there a difference between someone that experiences this kind of trauma, rape at a young age, and then in adulthood? Like, is it different? Can they cope better as an adult, or is every experience, it's an individual thing?
Absolutely. You know, I don't say I had mental health issues. I had trauma. I wasn't suffering with mental health. It came out and it looked like it was mental health, which was why it was treated inappropriately. They never looked to the cause of what was causing me to behave like that. But it really depends on the person. You know, as a therapist, I could get two clients, for example, both have lost their fathers. Their fathers have recently died. And one will just say to me, I'm heartbroken, I'll never get over the death of my father, nothing will ever be the same again. And another one can say to me, yes, I'm sad, but I'm so grateful that he was my father and I'm just so honoured to have been his daughter. So we will respond how we will respond, and that depends on many factors, on our upbringing, on our mindset, on our understandings, you know, on our conditionings. It's not really about what happens to us, you know, it's what we do with it. But certainly when we're younger, we have less capacity to deal with trauma. And it showed me how very biological trauma is, because my body just responded without me saying, I'm going to do this, that, or the other. It just went into shock. It went into trauma by shutting down and quietening down and trying to hide and, you know, keep away from people.
And Madeleine, going through what you've gone through and reaching this amount of strength now, where you actually speak out against rape and you try to enlighten other women and encourage them to speak out as well, would you say something to your younger self, to that 13-year-old girl, as to how she should handle this and how it would be better in order to heal in a quicker manner? Or do you think, no, everything that happened for a reason and it had to go through its process?
Yeah, I don't like to have regrets. I don't like to look back and say, if only I had done this and I should have spoken out earlier and this, that, and the other, because I didn't. And, you know, when we do that, we don't have our feet in reality. We have our feet in not believing. We have our feet in denying. You know, when I say, can't believe that happened, or I wish I'd done that, that's me not accepting. So I have come to a place of acceptance. I know all that had happened to me. What I would go back and say to her, though, is that it was never your fault, you know, because I lived with guilt for years, that somehow I'd brought it on myself because I was drinking and I lied about where I was staying. I know now that 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists and nothing else. That's it. That's the only cause of rape, was those two men who decided to rape me that night.
And how can you tell a woman, because this is something that exists in my community, in my society a lot, there's a lot of victim shaming. And I think this victim shaming is the main reason that Iranian women don't come out and they don't speak out, because they're so afraid of not being believed and of being shamed, of being told it's your fault. What were you wearing? Why did you go to his house? How did you behave? And so how do you think we can get past this shame?
Well, you started off by saying that recently there's been a mini Me Too movement. So we've seen that there are strength in numbers. You know, the more of us that stand together as a collective army, I guess, army of survivors, we do support each other because there is strength in numbers. But it does just take that one voice. The woman who started Me Too all those years ago, she was just one voice, you know. So we are stronger together, and we have to just fight the system. There's no other way to it. We have to break down rape culture, rape myths. I think since I've seen you, I've been asked to be a patron of another organisation now called Justice Is Now. And it's based in the UK, so they are looking at challenging all the rape myths and rape victim blaming messages that are used within the judicial system. So the culture that judges and solicitors use, you know, they already come with preconceived ideas, or the juries already come with preconceived ideas. So it makes it really difficult to speak out, as you say, because there is so much victim blaming. And then we have to look into all the subtleties, you know, the music, the films, how women are portrayed in advertising, and the way that we just sexualize our young children. There's just so many areas that need changing. But I hope, you know, I'm a mum of 3 girls, that my girls will never grow up in an office like my mum grew up in. My mum said it was normal for the boss to pinch your bum and grab you by the waist and tickle you, and my girls have never known that. So it doesn't feel like it, but things are changing. They are, slowly, but yes, tons more changes needed.
And Madeleine, you talked about at a young age, it led you to be a bit promiscuous.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see whether this whole experience affected your relationship with men, and also your definition of love even. Did you feel at some point that this is how men love? And did you have that misconception? Did you have that understanding? Because you were very young. And so this is supposed to be sex, is supposed to be that intimate, you know, connection. So did that ever define your definition of love?
It did, but not anymore. For a long time, you know, if a guy tried it on with me, I was terrified, and I would let them do whatever they want to do, because I always feared it would become violent like it did last time, which is kind of how I ended up becoming promiscuous, because, you know, the more people found out, then the more people would try. But luckily for me, it sounds a bit strange, my behaviour went off the wall, so not luckily for me, but my parents decided it would be good if I went away for a while. So I travelled away for a year, and I went to Israel, which is where I met my husband 37 years ago, quite a long time ago now. I know, but he really showed me that I was lovable. And at the time, I didn't believe I was lovable, because I still had this image of myself as being this broken, unlovable, worthless person. But I guess with unconditional love, it showed me that I could let his love in, I could give love back to him. And I really, through him, I guess I slowly learned to like myself and love myself. But in the beginning, it was hard in our intimate relationship, because you know, his face could turn into their faces, or I could see them hovering above me, or at the end I would always cry, and it was never about him. It was just always, you know, they interfered in that very special, lovely moment. Why are they here right now? But now it's absolutely fine. But it obviously affects all areas of your life.
And Madeleine, when it came to you speaking out actually for the first time, where who was it that you shared this story with?
Well, I shared it on a website with an organisation called the Forgiveness Project, because I went on to forgive the 2 men who raped me. It was a choice that I made for me and not for anybody else. And they learned about my story and asked if I could share it. And so once it went up on their website 6 years ago, it kind of went a bit viral, and I was invited to speak. So just a few months after that, I think in November 2014, I was asked to speak at a festival of light in Kiel University, and I'd never spoken before, and the fire alarm went off in the middle. It was interesting, but I realized that I could speak. You know, I didn't get nervous, because I cared so much about the audience. You know, it's not about me, it's about what my story can now do for other people, because I do believe in the power that comes when we share our stories. You know, Marina, who is the founder of the organisation, the Forgiveness Project, she calls us story healers rather than storytellers. And I have felt that so many times, you know, speaking to audiences all across the world, the healing power that comes, because sadly, as we know, my story is not uncommon. It's the story of many, many men and women somewhere on this planet. Every day there is rape and abuse taking place. So yeah, I realized if I can speak out, then I really should, that it's my duty. So I do get nervous, obviously, like most people, but once I start, I think, well, this is not about me. This is about what it can do for other people. And that helps to ground me and to keep me focused on what I'm there to do.
And Madeleine, when you talk about healing, do you think this speaking out actually helps you heal, or do you think you were already healed before you started speaking out?
That's a really good question, because I thought I was really, really healed, but when I did share my story, I felt like a big wave of shame coming up again. And I thought, oh no, what are people going to think? Because a lot of my friends maybe knew, but they didn't know it was near fatal, or some friends didn't know at all. What would they think? Would they look at me differently? Would they still want to know me? Then I realized that was still my shame and still some of my trauma. So actually, every time I speak, it strengthens me, because it just, any shame that's left, it just eradicates it, because I don't care who knows anymore. I know I have nothing to be ashamed about. This was a crime committed against my body. It was nothing to do with me. You know, I'm not my body. I'm not the events in my life. I'm not what happened to me. All of us are so much more than what happens to us.
I love that about you when you say that, because, you know, I've heard a lot of women come out and they send me messages and they tell me that, you know, it's so painful. And I've experienced sexual harassment, I've experienced sexual assault. And for me, I feel that since I've spoken out against it, I feel a lot more peace inside me. And I want to give that gift to other women and say, you know, once you speak, the truth will set you free. Once you speak, you know, that's freedom in itself. But, you know, it's very difficult. And I really want you to actually highlight this, Madeleine, when it comes to, you know, this whole rape and sexual harassment and assault, what happens to our body, and it kind of takes away from our bodily integrity. Can we really heal from that? And how do we start that healing process?
Well, you know, I didn't get to this place overnight. It's been a process. And I would say the same for anybody trying to find their voice. It is a process. You can't just wake up and go, right, today's the day I'm going to forgive everything. I'm going to stop denying. I'm going to accept it all. Everything that happened to me, I'm really okay. It's like multi-layered. You know, I would do a little bit of work, some therapy for a while, and that would be okay. And then I would get another surge of trauma coming up, something else would trigger it, and then I'd go away and do some more work for a year or two, and then I'd go, you know, so that's we're always improving, we're always working. But yes, you absolutely can heal. And if anything, now I would say I have post-traumatic growth. You know, I think I would never wish what happened to me on anybody else, but I wouldn't be where I am today if that hadn't happened. I don't think I wouldn't have been tested. I wouldn't know how strong I was. I wouldn't know that I could stand in front of 2,500 people at TEDx and share my story and not be ashamed. You know, there's so many things I wouldn't have known. That I really do think we are all stronger than we think we are. And I can't make people tell their story or share their story. I can't make somebody stop denying all the details or accept it. That is a very personal journey. But if you set your intention and you get the right support and the right help, you can absolutely heal from anything.
And Madeleine, when it comes to you talking about your story, does it happen where it still hurts you, where you can even cry, perhaps?
It doesn't really affect me so much anymore. I can speak about it freely and easily, and I wouldn't do it if I couldn't, because I wouldn't want to be using the stage for therapy. You know, I wouldn't want to traumatize my audience. But yeah, sometimes it surprises me that, oh, that it does get to me now and again, but not in a huge way. I really feel more when people contact me and they tell me their stories and how me speaking has impacted on them, and then they go off and heal and do amazing things, and then they start to inspire other people as well. So it's like a domino effect, you know. Somebody else speaking out helped me to find my voice, and vice versa. It just goes on and on and on. It's a massive ripple effect. And I think courage is contagious. You know, if we can see somebody standing on the stage sharing their story and they're not impacted or affected by it, it gives hope for other people. And that's really what I want to do, is to give hope for others.
And Madeleine, when it comes to, you talk about forgiveness, and that's a very important part of your story. So you managed to forgive the perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about forgiveness, and you have three daughters yourself, don't you sometimes fear that maybe this sends this message that you're supposed to be perhaps passive in the face of, sexual assault or rape? You should take it lightly, and it's not really that big of a deal. Don't you fear?
It's a huge deal. It affected my well-being for decades, and it's not something to be taken lightly. It is a crime. And as I said before, forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about my journey, and it really was my key to freedom, because before I forgave, I was filled with hate and anger and just rage, revenge. And I realized they would have no idea. It was only going to harm me and my husband and my kids that I very nearly didn't have. So, yeah, you should never take it lightly. It's not something to be taken lightly. Absolutely not.
And unfortunately, with the Iranian Me Too movement, or the moment that we had, a lot of men actually started to speak out and say, you're throwing out these names, and you have to go to court, and you have to prove it, and it's destroying the reputation of high-profile men even. But Madeleine, I come from a society where women in my country are considered second-class citizens. They don't have rights, equal rights as men. And, often their issues are dismissed as secondary or tertiary. So what do you think as a woman, if you could imagine yourself living in that kind of society where not only you go through this terrible experience, but then you're told to hush and be quiet, and it's not important, it's not a big deal? What do you think, as a psychotherapist, if you were to give advice to women, what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, I guess you have to be very careful who you tell your story to. If you've never spoken out about it for the first time, be very careful who you share it with. Make sure it's somebody that you trust, because you don't want to be sharing it with everybody. You don't want it. You want to be supported in the sharing and the telling of your story. And it's very hard in places like the country you're describing, because politically you're not supported. You don't have rights. You are a second-class citizen. But it's going to take women fighting. It's not going to be easy. It's got to be a lot of conditioning to change, and it's not an easy job to do at all, but it's worth it for our daughters and their daughters and their daughters, and our sons and their sons and their sons, because there will be men that have been raped there as well, which would be hard for them to speak out as well. But women, it's hard, when women speak out, we get victim blamed, so that just silences us even more. Or you can be victim blamed. I'm not saying everybody does, and that was my fear when I first came out, that nobody would believe me. They think I'm making it up. But why would you make that up? You wouldn't make that up. You would make up anything else. Yeah, it's not easy when you're living in a society that doesn't support you, and in the Western world we're meant to be supported, and yet we're not supported either. So it's not an easy job.
And what about women? Have you ever faced hate from women for speaking out? Because unfortunately, again, in my society, we have women supporting women, but we also have something that is quite contrary. And actually, women are kind of dismissive as well. They side with the men. They side with the predators. They side with, those who've actually sexually harassed women, and they invite women to be silent. This is a famous singer, you can't say anything against him. And have you ever faced anything similar?
I'm very lucky. Since I've come out of my story, I've hardly ever been trolled or had any negativity. I've always been really supported. So it's very hard for me to answer from that, and it's hard as a woman to understand why a woman could behave like that as well. But it all comes down to conditioning. It's what they're made to believe in that society, in their culture, and that is really where the work is. It just shows us that's just so much more work to do in those areas, to educate people that actually, no, it's not down to the women, it's not down to what they were wearing, because we know babies in nappies are raped. We know that women in burqas are raped. We know that boys are raped men. You know, it's nothing to do with our clothing or what we were drinking, where we were at night, where we were in the day. And most women will know the person that rapes her. You know, it's very unusual to have somebody jump out of the bushes. There's so much rape within marriages, relationships, between family members. You know, most women will know the person that is the perpetrator. So yes, a lot of work to do, but this is where the challenges lie.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. It was great to talk to you again. I
You're
really
welcome.
enjoy our conversations. You have so much positivity and so much light that you spread. And I really do hope that what you said today really affects women in my country, where they understand that, first of all, 1 in 4 women are raped. And so that statistic in itself tells you this is not a regional issue. It's a kind of pandemic, you know, and it affects more people than Corona does. So knowing all of this, I really do hope that we reach a point where women at least are not told to hush and be quiet after going through that terrible experience. Thank you so much, Madeleine Black, psychotherapist, author of the book Unbroken. Would you like to tell our viewers about your book?
Sure. This is my book is my memoir. This is it here, Unbroken. And it really tells my story, my journey of being gang raped, but it follows my journey of survival, healing, forgiveness, transformation, and hope. It's not really a self-help guide, but it is my story, so it may resonate with some people that have been through something similar, or for people that want to understand if they've had a partner or a friend that have been affected by sexual violence. But it shows you that I'm okay in the end. Through it all, whatever happened to me, I found my strength and I found my voice, and I'm going to live my life as best as I possibly can, refusing to be identified by what had happened to me.
Well, thank you, Madeleine. Thank you so much. It was great having you. And I look forward to following you and seeing you in your journey. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.